The neutron bomb father. In 1958, inside the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, a young physicist named Samuel Cohen received an unusual assignment. The Pentagon wanted a new kind of nuclear weapon, one that could stop Soviet tank divisions in Europe without destroying entire cities. Cohen began working on a radical concept, a bomb that would release minimal blast but maximum radiation. The neutron bomb. It would kill every living thing within its radius while leaving buildings, vehicles, and infrastructure intact. The physics were elegant. Reduce the fission trigger, maximize the fusion reaction, and let the neutrons do the killing. Neutrons pass through armor, concrete, and steel. They destroy cells from the inside. Death comes within hours or days. By 1963, the first prototype was tested. The W-70 warhead became the foundation of America's enhanced radiation weapons program. The Nevada desert lit up with secret tests. Each detonation proved Cohen's theory correct. But inside the Pentagon, enthusiasm was mixed with unease. This weapon was too efficient at one thing, killing people. Critics called it the capitalist bomb, a weapon designed to kill workers while preserving property. Cohen defended his creation. He argued it was more humane than conventional nuclear weapons. Less destruction, fewer long-term effects. Declassified documents revealed the military's internal debate. Some generals wanted thousands deployed across Europe. Others warned of escalation. If the Soviets believed America would use neutron bombs, they might strike first with everything they had. In 1977, President Carter reviewed the program. The political cost was deemed too high. In April 1978, Carter announced the cancellation. The neutron bomb would not enter mass production. Samuel Cohen was devastated. He had spent 2 decades perfecting a weapon he believed could prevent World War III. He argued publicly that the decision was political, not moral. That conventional war would kill far more people than his clean bomb ever could. But the program didn't truly die. Classified memos show that production quietly resumed under Reagan in 1981. Hundreds of W-70-3 warheads were assembled in secret, deployed to Europe without public announcement. Cohen was never invited back into the program. The government used his work but discarded the man who created it. He spent his final decades writing books and giving interviews, warning that his invention would eventually be used. In 2010, Samuel Cohen died at 89. His obituaries called him controversial. His legacy remains classified. Today, the United States maintains an unknown number of enhanced radiation weapons. Their exact locations are never disclosed. Other nations followed. France developed its own version. Reports suggest Israel, China, and Russia have similar programs. The weapon Cohen created was designed to be tactical, limited, surgical. But in the wrong hands, it becomes something else entirely. A neutron bomb detonated over a city would leave every building standing, every car parked, every street intact. But every living creature within the blast radius would be dead or dying, killed not by fire or pressure, but by invisible particles passing through their bodies. Cohen believed he had created the most humane weapon of mass destruction ever conceived. The world disagreed. Declassified studies estimate that a single neutron warhead could incapacitate an area of 2 square kilometers. Every person exposed would receive a lethal dose within minutes. The radiation would penetrate tanks, bunkers, and shelters. No armor could stop it. No walls thick enough to block the neutrons. Soldiers would continue fighting for hours, unaware they were already dead. The symptoms would come later, then the collapse. Medical reports from radiation exposure studies describe the progression. Nausea within hours, internal bleeding within days, death within 2 weeks. Cohen's weapon was efficient, too efficient. It removed the spectacle of destruction and left only the quiet mathematics of death. That was the problem. War, the generals understood, required visible horror. The neutron bomb made killing too clean. Without mushroom clouds and firestorms, there would be no photographs to stop the next war, no images to haunt the conscience of nations. And so, the neutron bomb became a paradox. A weapon too effective to be morally acceptable, too clean to serve as a deterrent. Samuel Cohen went to his grave believing he had been betrayed, that politicians had sacrificed logic for optics. His final interviews reveal a man haunted not by what he created, but by what he believed could have been prevented. Millions of conventional war deaths, exposed tank crews, burning cities. He asked a question no one wanted to answer. If you must kill in war, is it better to destroy everything or only the enemy? The world chose not to answer. Instead, it buried the question along with the weapon. But buried weapons have a way of resurfacing, and buried questions eventually demand answers. Somewhere in the world tonight, neutron warheads sit in stockpiles, ready, waiting, their existence neither confirmed nor denied. Samuel Cohen created a weapon that killed only people, and the world decided that was the one line it would not cross. He built the bomb that saves buildings and destroys lives, and perhaps that honesty was the most dangerous thing of all. The Agent Orange chemist. In 1943, at the University of Illinois, a young botanist named Arthur Galston was searching for a way to make soybeans grow faster. His research focused on plant hormones, chemicals that could accelerate flowering and increase crop yields during wartime food shortages. Galston discovered a compound called TIBA, triiodobenzoic acid. In small doses, it made plants bloom earlier, but in high concentrations, something unexpected happened. The leaves began to fall, not gradually, like autumn. All at once, within hours, healthy plants stood completely bare. Galston had accidentally discovered defoliation, the ability to strip vegetation bare with chemistry alone. He published his findings as a warning. High doses of synthetic growth hormones could destroy plant life. He never imagined anyone would weaponize it. But the military was watching. By 1961, the Department of Defense had adapted Galston's research into a classified program called Project Agile. The goal was simple. In Vietnam, dense jungle gave the enemy cover. If you could kill the trees, you could expose the enemy. They called it Agent Orange, a rainbow of herbicides, Agent White, Agent Blue, Agent Purple, but orange was the deadliest. Agent Orange was a mixture of two herbicides, 2,4-D, and 2,4,5-T. But the manufacturing process created a byproduct no one discussed publicly, dioxin. Dioxin is one of the most toxic substances ever synthesized. A few parts per trillion can cause cancer, birth defects, and immune system collapse. In January 1962, Operation Ranch Hand began. American planes flew low over Vietnamese jungles, spraying millions of gallons from specially modified aircraft. The motto was, "Only we can prevent forests." Between 1962 and 1971, over 20 million gallons of Agent Orange rained down on Southeast Asia. The results were immediate. Entire forests died within weeks. Jungle that had stood for centuries turned to skeletal wastelands. Arthur Galston watched from America in horror. His discovery, meant to help plants grow, was being used to destroy them on an industrial scale. He began writing letters to the Pentagon, to Congress, to anyone who would listen. He warned that the chemicals were poisoning more than trees. Internal memos from Dow Chemical and Monsanto, the manufacturers, reveal they knew about dioxin contamination as early as 1965. They said nothing. Vietnamese civilians were the first to suffer, farmers who worked the sprayed fields, families who drank from contaminated streams, children who played in the chemical mist. Then, the American soldiers began getting sick. The same men who had loaded the barrels, flown the planes, and walked through freshly sprayed zones. Medical reports documented cancers, neurological damage, and a terrifying pattern of birth defects in veterans' children, conditions that appeared years after exposure. Galston escalated his campaign. In 1966, he co-authored a petition signed by 5,000 scientists demanding an end to herbicidal warfare. The government's response was silence, then dismissal. Officials claimed Agent Orange was safe, no more harmful than aspirin. For years, the official position held. Agent Orange was a defoliant, not a weapon. The dioxin was an unavoidable trace contaminant, nothing to worry about. But the bodies kept piling up. By 1970, even the military could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. In April 1970, the Surgeon General's office issued a quiet advisory. Agent Orange should be restricted due to potential teratogenic effects, the ability to cause birth defects. Operation Ranch Hand was officially terminated in 1971, but the damage was already done. The chemicals had soaked into the soil, the water, the food chain. For the Vietnamese, the nightmare was just beginning. Dioxin persists in the environment for decades. It accumulates in the food supply. It passes from mother to child. 3 generations later, children are still being born with defects linked to their grandparents' exposure. The genetic damage continues to echo through time. Arthur Galston spent the rest of his life trying to undo what his discovery had caused. He became one of the most vocal critics of chemical warfare. He traveled to Vietnam multiple times. He met the victims. He looked into the eyes of children suffering from conditions his research had helped create. In 1971, Galston helped draft the first international agreement restricting herbicidal warfare. It was a small victory in a war he had already lost. American veterans began filing lawsuits in the 1980s. They demanded recognition that their cancers, their children's birth defects, were caused by Agent Orange. The chemical companies fought back. They hired scientists to dispute the connection. They buried studies. They delayed settlements for decades. In 1984, a class action settlement was reached. $180 million for hundreds of thousands of veterans. It averaged less than $1,000 per person. The chemical companies admitted no wrongdoing. They claimed the settlement was merely to avoid litigation costs. The word responsibility never appeared. It wasn't until 1991, nearly 20 years after the spraying ended, that the U.S. government officially acknowledged the link between Agent Orange and disease. The Agent Orange Act of 1991 presumed that certain cancers and conditions were service-connected. Veterans no longer had to prove the impossible. But for millions of Vietnamese, there was no act, no acknowledgement, no settlement. America never officially accepted responsibility for their suffering. Arthur Galston died in 2008 at the age of 88. He had spent 40 years fighting against the weaponization of his own discovery. His obituaries remembered him as a pioneer of plant biology. But he asked to be remembered differently, as a man who spent his life trying to correct a terrible mistake. Today, dioxin cleanup continues in Vietnam. Decades of work remain. The land still remembers what was done to it. The chemical companies still operate. They have changed names, merged, restructured. But the profits from Agent Orange built empires that stand today. Arthur Galston wanted to help crops grow. Instead, he gave humanity a weapon that poisoned 3 generations. And he spent his life trying to take it back. He asked the question that haunts every scientist who watches their work be turned to destruction. Where does discovery end and responsibility begin? He never found an answer. Perhaps there isn't one. But he kept asking, until the very end. The Anthrax Weaponeer. In 1988, deep within the Soviet Republic of Kazakhstan, a secret city existed that appeared on no map. Stepnogorsk, population classified. Inside, over 10,000 workers reported each day to a facility officially listed as a pesticide factory. But no pesticides were ever shipped from its gates. The facility was part of Biopreparat, the Soviet Union's clandestine biological weapons program. Officially, it didn't exist. Unofficially, it employed 60,000 scientists across 40 sites. At the head of Stepnogorsk stood a young colonel named Kanatjan Alibekov. Brilliant, ambitious, and utterly loyal to the Soviet state. Alibekov's assignment was simple in description, terrifying in scope. Create a strain of anthrax that could survive any known antibiotic. Anthrax. Bacillus anthracis. One of the oldest known biological weapons. Stable in spore form for decades. Lethal in microgram quantities. The perfect instrument of mass death. For years, Alibekov and his team worked in biosafety suits, manipulating one of nature's deadliest pathogens. They called it defensive research. It was anything but. They developed strain 836, anthrax modified to resist all first-line antibiotics. Even with treatment, infection would be fatal. Without treatment, death came in 48 hours. But creating the pathogen was only half the mission. It needed a delivery system, something that could spread death across entire cities. The solution was elegant in its horror. The SS-18 Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, NATO designation, Satan. Each warhead could carry enough anthrax to kill a city of millions. Internal documents projected casualties. A single warhead over New York. 3 million dead in the first week. No medical system could respond. No vaccine existed in sufficient quantities. Stepnogorsk alone produced 300 tons of weaponized anthrax annually, enough to wage biological war on a global scale. And Stepnogorsk was just one facility. Across the Soviet Union, dozens more operated in parallel. Plague, smallpox, Ebola, all being weaponized simultaneously. But in 1989, the Soviet Empire began to crack. The Berlin Wall fell. Republics demanded independence, and Alibekov began to question everything he had built. He had told himself it was deterrence, that the Americans had their own programs, that his work was keeping the balance of terror intact. But then he learned the truth. The United States had abandoned offensive biological weapons in 1969. Nixon had signed the order himself. There was no American program to balance. The Soviet Union had signed the Biological Weapons Convention in 1972. They had promised to destroy all stockpiles. Instead, they had tripled production. Alibekov's loyalty shattered. He had devoted his career to a lie. His weapons weren't deterrents. They were first-strike instruments for a war of aggression. In 1992, as the Soviet Union collapsed, Alibekov made his decision. He defected to the United States, carrying secrets that would reshape American intelligence. He changed his name to Ken Alibek. He testified before Congress. He revealed the full scope of what the Soviets had built and what remained after the collapse. He described weapons no one in the West had imagined. Plague engineered to resist all treatment. Smallpox stockpiles hidden from inspectors. Facilities still operating in Russia. His book, Biohazard, published in 1999, became a bestseller. For the first time, the public learned the true scale of Soviet biological warfare ambitions. Russia denied everything. They called Alibek a traitor, a liar, a Western propaganda tool. The facilities he described, they claimed, had never existed. But satellite imagery told a different story. The facilities existed exactly where Alibek said they would. Some showed signs of continued activity well into the 2000s. The most terrifying revelation concerned Vozrojdeniya Island in the Aral Sea, a test site where biological weapons were detonated in open-air experiments. Thousands of animals were exposed to weaponized pathogens on that island. When the Soviet Union fell, the test subjects were simply abandoned. The anthrax remained in the soil. As the Aral Sea shrank due to Soviet irrigation projects, the island began connecting to the mainland. The contamination started spreading. The nightmare was escaping its prison. In 2002, the United States funded an emergency cleanup mission. Teams in hazmat suits excavated and destroyed over 200 tons of anthrax buried in the island's pits. But questions remained. How much anthrax was still buried? How many other sites existed? And who had access to the surviving stockpiles after the Soviet collapse? Ken Alibek became an American citizen. He consulted for the government on biodefense. The man who built weapons of mass death now worked to protect against them. But his past followed him. Former colleagues called him a traitor. Russian intelligence reportedly placed him on surveillance lists. Some threats were more direct. In interviews, he spoke of guilt, of the faces he imagined, the millions who would have died if his weapons had ever been used. He estimated that if a full-scale biological attack had been launched, global casualties could have reached 500 million, 1 in 10 humans alive at the time. The weapons he built were never used, but they came close. During the Cold War's tensest moments, the order to launch could have come at any time. Today, the threat hasn't disappeared. It has evolved. The scientists who built the Soviet program scattered after the collapse. Some found work in the West, others did not. Intelligence agencies tracked most of them, but not all. The knowledge to create civilization-ending weapons now exists in minds scattered across the globe. The Biological Weapons Convention has no verification mechanism, no inspections, no enforcement. Countries can sign and violate it with impunity. Russia still denies biopreparat ever existed as described. The facilities have been converted, they claim. the research destroyed. But inspectors have never been allowed full access. Ken Alibek lives in the United States today. He rarely gives interviews anymore. The weight of what he knows and what he built follows him still. He built weapons capable of ending human civilization. Then he walked away and told the world what he had done. The question is, was it enough? 300 tons of anthrax, enough to kill every human on Earth several times over, created by one man in one facility in a country that no longer exists. And somewhere in the world tonight, someone with similar knowledge is making a similar choice to build or to warn. The future depends on which path they take. Kanatjan Alibekov chose to speak. He broke his silence and shattered his loyalty to expose a program that threatened all life on Earth. He knew how to destroy humanity, and he decided the world needed to know so that perhaps one day we could stop it from ever happening. The nerve gas pioneer. In 1936, in a laboratory belonging to the German chemical giant I.G. Farben, a quiet chemist named Gerhard Schrader was trying to solve a simple problem: how to kill insects more efficiently. Germany's agriculture was under threat. Crop-eating pests destroyed millions of tons of food annually. Schrader believed chemistry could provide the answer. He experimented with organophosphate compounds, chemicals that attack the nervous system of insects, paralyzing them within seconds of exposure. On December 23, 1936, Schrader synthesized a new compound. He called it Preparation 9/91. It was extraordinarily effective against insects. Then he spilled a single drop. Within minutes, his pupils contracted to pinpoints. His chest tightened. Breathing became difficult. He stumbled from the laboratory, barely conscious. He survived. Barely. Weeks of recovery followed. But Schrader understood immediately. He had created something far more dangerous than an insecticide. Under Nazi law, any discovery with potential military application had to be reported to the Reich. Schrader had no choice. He sent his findings to the Army Weapons Office. The military response was immediate. Colonel Rudiger, head of the Chemical Weapons Division, recognized what Schrader had created, a weapon beyond anything in existence. They renamed it Taboon, from the German word for taboo, the first nerve agent in human history. A single milligram could kill an adult within minutes. Taboon attacked the enzyme acetylcholinesterase, the chemical that tells muscles when to stop contracting. Without it, the body tears itself apart. Victims would experience muscle spasms, uncontrollable bodily functions, and finally, suffocation, as the muscles controlling breathing locked in permanent contraction. The Nazis classified Taboon at the highest level. A massive production facility was built in secret at Die Herrenfurth, near the Polish border. 12,000 tons were manufactured by 1945. But Schrader didn't stop there. In 1938, still searching for a better insecticide, he created something 10 times more lethal. He called it sarin. Sarin was named after its four creators: Schrader, Ambros, Ritter, and van der Linde. It was volatile, fast-acting, and lethal in quantities invisible to the naked eye. Hitler now possessed the most lethal chemical weapons ever created. Shells and bombs were filled with nerve agents. The Wehrmacht was ready to deploy them at a moment's notice. But the order to use them never came. Throughout 6 years of war, the deadliest weapons in Germany's arsenal remained in their storage bunkers. Why? Historians have debated this for decades. Some say Hitler feared retaliation. He wrongly believed the Allies had their own nerve agents. Others point to Hitler's own experience. Temporarily blinded by mustard gas in World War I, he retained a visceral horror of chemical warfare. Whatever the reason, nerve agents were never deployed in combat during World War II. The weapons existed, the targets existed, the order simply never came. When the war ended, Allied forces discovered the German stockpiles. They were stunned. The West had nothing comparable. They had been defenseless without knowing it. Operation Paperclip brought German scientists to America. Operation Osoaviakhim did the same for the Soviets. The nerve agent knowledge spread to both superpowers. And Gerhard Schrader, the man who started it all? He returned to his laboratory at Bayer, the successor to E.G. Farben. He went back to making pesticides. He was never charged with war crimes. He claimed he was just a scientist, following orders, trying to help agriculture. The nerve agents, he said, were an accident that created the most efficient means of human extermination ever devised, an accident that would be used in wars, terrorist attacks, and assassinations for the next 80 years. In 1988, Saddam Hussein used nerve agents against Kurdish civilians at Halabja, 5,000 dead in a single afternoon. Schrader's accident had found new hands. In 1995, the Aum Shinrikyo cult released Sarin in the Tokyo subway. 13 dead, thousands injured. Terror had adopted the Chemist formula. In 2013 and 2017, the Assad regime dropped sarin on Syrian civilians. The images shocked the world, but the world did little to stop it. In 2018, Russian agents used Novichok, a nerve agent far more advanced than Schrader's creations, to poison a former spy in Salisbury, England. The evolution continued. Gerhard Schrader died in 1990, aged 87. His obituaries praised his contributions to agriculture. They mentioned the nerve agents only briefly, if at all. He received over 300 patents in his lifetime. Most were for pesticides that saved millions of tons of crops. Some were for compounds that could exterminate humanity. The same chemistry that protects crops from insects can destroy the human nervous system. Schrader discovered both applications in the same laboratory, in the same year. The Chemical Weapons Convention, signed in 1993, banned nerve agents worldwide. 193 countries agreed. But agreements are only paper. Stockpiles still exist. Research continues under the guise of defense, and the formulas, Schrader's formulas, are available in any university chemistry library. Any competent chemist with the right precursors can synthesize nerve agents in a basement laboratory. The barrier isn't knowledge anymore, it's conscience. Schrader asked himself whether he bore responsibility. In interviews late in life, he maintained that he was a scientist, not a soldier. The military made the weapons. He only made the compounds. But his own notebooks tell a different story. After the first nerve agent worked, he didn't stop. He kept synthesizing more lethal compounds. Sarin, soman, knowing exactly what they were. He knew. After Taboon, after his own near death, he understood completely what these compounds could do. And he made them better at killing. He created the pesticides that saved millions from famine. He created the nerve agents that killed thousands in gas attacks. The same hands, the same mind, the same legacy. This is the dilemma of dual-use science. The same knowledge that feeds us can destroy us. The same chemistry that heals can kill. Schrader didn't set out to create weapons of mass destruction. He wanted to kill insects. But intention doesn't determine consequence. The nerve agents exist now. They cannot be uninvented. Every chemistry student learns the pathways. Every government knows the formulas. Pandora's box, opened by a man trying to save crops. Gerhard Schrader proved that the line between saving lives and taking them can be a single drop of liquid in a laboratory accident. And once crossed, there is no going back. He wanted to help farmers. He ended up arming dictators and terrorists. The father of nerve gas, a title he never sought, but one he cannot escape. The Acoustic Death Ray. In 1940, as Nazi Germany conquered Europe, a French inventor named Vladimir Gavreau was studying the physics of sound. He believed acoustics could change the world. He was right, but not in the way he hoped. Gavreau was a specialist in robotics and acoustics at the French National Center for Scientific Research. His laboratory was in Marseille, a city that would soon fall under Vichy control. During the occupation, Gavreau continued his research under German supervision. The Nazis were interested in any science that could become a weapon. Acoustics was no exception. The key discovery came by accident. Gavreau's laboratory was plagued by a mysterious illness. Workers felt nauseous, disoriented, anxious, but only in certain parts of the building. After months of investigation, Gavreau found the source. A faulty industrial fan in a nearby factory was producing infrasound, sound waves below the range of human hearing. Infrasound, frequencies below 20 hertz, too low for the ear to detect, but the body feels them. The lungs resonate, the organs vibrate, the mind becomes confused. Gavreau realized he had stumbled onto something profound. If accidental infrasound could make workers ill, what could deliberate, focused infrasound do? After the war, Gavreau began deliberate experiments. He built infrasound generators, massive pipes and horns designed to produce frequencies that could shake buildings and bodies alike. The first tests were modest. A 7 Hz tone produced vertigo in subjects within minutes. Their vision blurred, their balance failed, some vomited uncontrollably. Gavreau documented everything. His papers describe how different frequencies affected different organs. At 3 Hz, subjects reported crushing pressure on the chest. At 12 Hz, the throat constricted. Then, Gavreau built something larger, much larger, a horn-shaped resonator that could produce a sustained infrasound pulse powerful enough to shake the walls of his laboratory. The first full power test nearly killed the research team. Windows shattered, equipment fell from shelves. The scientists themselves collapsed, unable to breathe. Gavreau later wrote that if the sound had continued for another 30 seconds, every person in the building would have died. Their internal organs would have ruptured from resonance. He called it the Acoustic Death Ray, a weapon that could kill without projectiles, without explosives, without any visible cause, death by sound. The French military was intrigued but skeptical. The device was enormous and the size of a building. How could it ever be deployed on a battlefield? Gavreau argued that miniaturization was possible. Smaller resonators could be mounted on vehicles. Infrasound could clear buildings without damaging them. Perfect for urban warfare. His proposals included a whistle device that could be carried by a single soldier. At close range, it would incapacitate enemies with nausea and disorientation, a non-lethal option. But there was a fundamental problem. Infrasound doesn't discriminate. It affects everyone in range, soldiers, civilians, even the operators themselves. Shielding was theoretically possible, but impractical. The frequencies were too low, the wavelengths too long. No helmet or uniform could block them. The French military eventually classified the research and shelved it. Too impractical for deployment, too dangerous for development. But the knowledge didn't disappear. Gavreau's papers were published in scientific journals. The principles were openly discussed. Any nation with acoustic engineers could recreate his work. The United States, Soviet Union, and Britain all investigated infrasound weapons during the Cold War. Each concluded the same thing: devastating in theory, impractical in reality. But the research continued in other forms. LRAD, the long-range acoustic device, emerged from similar principles. Not infrasound, but focused, painful sound for crowd control. Today, acoustic weapons are classified as non-lethal, but that term is misleading. Prolonged exposure causes permanent hearing loss, brain damage, and psychological trauma. In 2016, American diplomats in Cuba reported mysterious symptoms: headaches, hearing loss, cognitive difficulties. The suspected cause: directed acoustic or microwave weapons. The Havana syndrome has since affected hundreds of American officials worldwide. Some researchers believe it's a form of directed energy weapon, Gavreau's dream made portable. Others dismiss it as mass hysteria or environmental factors. The truth remains classified, but the possibility that Gavreau's acoustic weapons evolved into something real haunts intelligence agencies. Vladimir Gavreau died in 1973. His acoustic death ray never deployed, but the idea he planted continues to grow. Somewhere, someone is trying to perfect what he started. His original papers remain in French scientific archives, available to any researcher who knows where to look. The blueprint for a weapon of invisible death hiding in plain sight. Sound is everywhere. It passes through walls, through armor, through bodies. It cannot be seen coming. It leaves no evidence. The perfect weapon, if it could be controlled. Gavreau understood this better than anyone. He wrote that infrasound was the weapon of the future, one that required no ammunition, no supply lines, no visible aggression. He also warned of the dangers. In his final papers, he cautioned that acoustic weapons could be turned against civilian populations, used for control rather than combat. His predictions proved accurate. Today, LRAD devices are standard equipment for police departments worldwide. Sound has become a tool of crowd suppression. Protesters in Ferguson, Standing Rock, and Hong Kong have all faced acoustic weapons. Pain compliance, the police call it. Gavreau had another name: acoustic assault. The legal status remains murky. No international convention bans acoustic weapons. No treaty limits their development. The sound of death exists in a legal vacuum. Vladimir Gavreau proved that death could be invisible, silent to the ear, and impossible to shield against. He opened a door that cannot be closed. He began as a researcher, trying to understand why his colleagues felt ill. He ended as the architect of a weapon that could kill without warning, without trace, without defense. In interviews near the end of his life, Gavreau expressed no regret. He believed he had advanced human knowledge. What others did with that knowledge, he said, was not his responsibility. But can knowledge truly be separated from its consequences? Can a scientist who designs a death ray claim innocence because others press the button? The question has no easy answer. Scientists do not exist in isolation. Their work is funded, directed, and ultimately used by others. But they choose what to create. Vladimir Gavreau chose to continue his research after the first accidental harm. He chose to build larger devices. He chose to document weapons applications. Each choice was his. Today, somewhere in the world, researchers are building on Gavreau's work. Smaller devices, more focused beams, more precise targeting. The acoustic death ray is still evolving. The weapon that couldn't be built is being built. The death ray that was too large is shrinking, and the acoustic assault that was too imprecise is finding its aim. Vladimir Gavreau dreamed of a weapon that could kill without being seen or heard. He nearly achieved it, and those who followed him are finishing what he started, the Cobalt bomb theorist. In February 1950, a Hungarian-American physicist stood before a packed auditorium at UCLA and described the end of the world. His name was Leo Szilard. Szilard was no stranger to world-ending weapons. In 1933, he had conceived the nuclear chain reaction. In 1939, he had drafted the letter that convinced Roosevelt to build the atomic bomb. But after Hiroshima, Szilard became a peace activist. He campaigned against nuclear weapons, and then, in 1950, he proposed building something far worse, as a warning. The concept was elegantly horrifying. Take a hydrogen bomb, surround it with a shell of Cobalt-59, detonate it. The neutron flux would transmute the cobalt into Cobalt-60. Cobalt-60 emits intense gamma radiation with a half-life of 5.27 years, not long enough to decay quickly, not short enough to burn out fast, perfect for long-term contamination. Szilard calculated that 400 tons of Cobalt-60, distributed by a single massive bomb, could render the entire Earth uninhabitable. Every human being would die within years. He called it the Doomsday Machine, a weapon so terrible that its only purpose was to ensure that nuclear war could never be won, only lost by everyone. His audience was horrified. This wasn't a weapon of war. It was a murder-suicide pact for the entire human species. Why would anyone build such a thing? Szillard's answer was paradoxical. The cobalt bomb was so terrible that it would make nuclear war unthinkable. Its very existence would prevent its use. This was deterrence theory taken to its logical extreme. If destruction must be mutual to prevent war, then make destruction total. Make it inescapable. Make it final. The scientific community was divided. Some praised Szillard's courage in exposing the logical endpoint of nuclear escalation. Others condemned him for providing a blueprint for genocide. The idea spread rapidly. Newspapers ran headlines about the world-destroying bomb. The public, already terrified of nuclear war, now faced something even worse. The concept entered popular culture. In 1964, Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove featured a Soviet doomsday machine, directly inspired by Szillard's lecture. But did anyone actually build it? The answer is classified. Both the United States and Soviet Union investigated cobalt bombs. Neither confirmed production. Neither denied it. What we know is this. In 1971, the British tested a device codenamed Dovetail that included a cobalt casing. It was not a full doomsday machine, but it proved the concept worked. The Soviets reportedly tested similar devices in the 1950s and 1960s. Radioactive cobalt was detected in fallout from several tests, but official records remain sealed in Moscow archives. In 1961, the Soviets detonated the Tsar Bomba, the largest nuclear weapon ever built, 50 megatons of destruction. Had it been salted with cobalt, it could have contaminated half of Europe. Tsar Bomba was deliberately designed as a clean weapon, using a lead tamper instead of uranium to reduce fallout. Someone chose not to make it a doomsday device. That time. Szilard watched these developments with growing alarm. The weapon he had proposed as a warning was being treated as a blueprint. His deterrent theory was becoming a production plan. He spent his final years campaigning for arms control. He met with Khrushchev. He lobbied Kennedy. He helped draft the Partial Test Ban Treaty. He was trying to close the door he had opened. The Partial Test Ban Treaty of 1963 prohibited atmospheric nuclear testing. It didn't ban the cobalt bomb, but it made building one much harder to conceal. Leo Szilard died in 1964, just months after the treaty he helped create was signed. His final wish was for his papers to be sealed until humanity had matured enough to handle them. Those papers were eventually released. They revealed a man haunted by his own genius, the father of the atomic age who proposed an even worse weapon to prevent its use. The paradox of Szilard's life is the paradox of deterrence itself. To prevent war, you must make war unthinkable. To make war unthinkable, you must create unthinkable weapons. But did it work? Has the cobalt bomb's theoretical existence prevented nuclear war? Or has it simply raised the stakes in a game that could still end in extinction? 70 years have passed since Szilard's lecture. Nuclear weapons have been used twice in war, both times before the cobalt bomb was conceived. None have been used since. Correlation is not causation. Perhaps nuclear weapons haven't been used because of deterrence, perhaps because of luck, perhaps because the moment of madness hasn't arrived yet. What we know is that the cobalt bomb has never been officially deployed. The doomsday machine remains theoretical as far as public knowledge extends, but the knowledge exists. Any nuclear power could build a cobalt bomb tomorrow. The materials are available. The physics is understood. Only the decision remains. Szilard believed in human rationality. He trusted that faced with certain extinction, no leader would press the button. He bet the future of humanity on that trust. But rationality is fragile. Leaders make mistakes. Communications fail. Accidents happen. The Cuban Missile Crisis came within hours of nuclear war, if no one intended it. Declassified documents reveal at least a dozen incidents where nuclear war was nearly triggered by accident. False alarms, misread data, human error. Each time, someone chose not to launch. In 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov received warnings of an American nuclear attack. His training said, launch. His instinct said, wait. He chose to trust his instinct. The warning was false. One man's judgment saved humanity that night. Not systems, not protocols, not deterrence theory. One human being who decided to trust himself over his machines. Szilard's theory assumed rational actors with perfect information. Reality gave us fallible humans with faulty machines. The cobalt bomb might have been triggered by accident. Today, the risk remains. 9 countries possess nuclear weapons. Some are unstable. Some are hostile to each other. Some have leaders who reject the rationality Szilard assumed. And the technology to build a cobalt bomb is simpler now than in 1950. Any nation with nuclear weapons and industrial cobalt could construct one within months. The question Szilard raised in 1950 remains unanswered. How do you prevent the use of a weapon? By making the consequences unthinkable, or by never building it in the first place? Szilard chose deterrence. He believed showing humanity the abyss would keep us from falling in. He bet that fear of extinction would be stronger than fear of the enemy. So far, the bet has held. 75 years without nuclear war, the longest peace between great powers in modern history, built on the threat of total annihilation. Leo Szilard conceived the nuclear chain reaction, helped build the atomic bomb, and then proposed something worse to prevent its use. He was prophet, creator, and would-be savior, all in one lifetime. He asked the hardest question in human history. How do you prevent your own species from destroying itself? His answer was terrifying, but it might be the only answer we have. The cobalt bomb was never built, or if it was never used. the doomsday machine remains in the realm of theory and nightmare, where perhaps it belongs. He proposed the end of the world to prevent the end of the world. And in that paradox lies the terrible genius of Leo Szilard, the Cobalt bomb theorist, the Psychochemical Architect. In 1951, a young Army psychiatrist named James Ketchum arrived at Edgewood Arsenal in Maryland. He was told he would be conducting research to protect American soldiers. He wasn't told the whole truth. Edgewood was the U.S. Army's chemical weapons research facility. Since World War I, it had developed everything from mustard gas to nerve agents. But in the 1950s, it took a new direction. The new objective was incapacitating agents, chemicals that could disable enemy soldiers without killing them, make them confused, hallucinating, unable to fight. A humane weapon, they claimed. The program was called Project M. Cultra at the CIA level, and the Army's chemical research was part of a vast network exploring one question: could the human mind be weaponized? Dr. Ketchum was assigned to test a compound called BZ, 3-quinaclidinyl benzylate. It was a potent anticholinergic that induced days of vivid hallucinations and complete disorientation. BZ affected the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, the same system targeted by nerve agents. But instead of paralyzing muscles, it paralyzed cognition. Victims couldn't think, couldn't remember, couldn't distinguish real from imaginary. Testing began on human subjects, American soldiers who volunteered, sometimes without full knowledge of what they were volunteering for. The experiments were conducted in controlled wards. Soldiers were given BZ and observed for days as they descended into delirium. They talked to invisible people. They forgot their own names. Some tried to escape threats only they could see. Ketchum documented everything meticulously. His notes described subjects who couldn't light cigarettes because they saw phantom ones already lit. Men who conversed with people who had left the room hours ago. Over 2 decades, approximately 7,000 American soldiers were exposed to various psychochemical agents at Edgewood. Many were never told exactly what they had been given. The program's goal was clear: create a chemical that could incapacitate enemy forces without lasting harm. But without lasting harm proved to be an illusion. Years later, many test subjects reported ongoing problems: memory gaps, panic attacks, recurring hallucinations. The temporary effects had become permanent scars. Dr. Ketchum defended the research until his death in 2019. He argued that the experiments were necessary, that the volunteers knew the risks, that the knowledge gained protected soldiers in future wars. He wrote a book, Chemical Warfare: Secrets Almost Forgotten. In it, he detailed the BZ experiments with a mixture of scientific pride and defensive justification. The book included something remarkable: filmed footage of test subjects under the influence of BZ, soldiers stumbling, hallucinating, completely disconnected from reality. Evidence of what psychochemical weapons could do. The footage leaked. It became public. The world saw American soldiers used as guinea pigs, wandering in chemically induced madness while researchers calmly took notes. Congressional hearings followed. Veterans testified about experiments they barely remembered. Families demanded answers about fathers and brothers who came back changed. The government's response was familiar: regret without accountability. A 1994 report acknowledged inadequate informed consent, but recommended no prosecutions. The scientists were protected. Ketchum remained unapologetic. In interviews, he compared himself to doctors who test new medications. The subjects were soldiers, he said, following orders, serving their country. But there was a crucial difference. Drug trials seek to heal. Ketchum's work sought to harm, to create weapons that could destroy the human mind while leaving the body intact. The goal was incapacitation, not cure. The endpoint was helplessness, not health. Whatever the rhetoric, this was weapons development conducted on unwitting human subjects. BZ was eventually weaponized. The Army produced munitions containing the compound, artillery shells, and aerosol dispensers ready for battlefield deployment. Military documents describe scenarios for BZ deployment: spraying enemy positions before assault, incapacitating defenders without destroying infrastructure, the humane chemical war. But the weapons were never used in combat. Like so many revolutionary armaments, BZ proved impractical in the field, too unpredictable, too dependent on weather conditions, too likely to affect friendly forces. In 1988, the United States signed the Chemical Weapons Convention, which prohibited the development of incapacitating agents. The BZ program was officially terminated. The stockpiles were destroyed. But the knowledge survived. The research papers were preserved, and the question of psychochemical weapons continued to haunt military planners worldwide. In 2002, Russian special forces used a mysterious aerosol during the Moscow theater hostage crisis. Over 100 hostages died from the chemical exposure. The exact agent remains classified, but experts suspect a Ketchum-style incapacitant. The Moscow incident proved what critics had always warned. There is no safe incapacitating dose for a large population. Individual responses vary too widely. What sedates one person kills another. Ketchum dismissed the Moscow deaths as a failure of medical response, not chemical design. Even facing evidence of mass casualties, he maintained that incapacitating agents could work, if used correctly. James Ketchum died in 2019, still convinced his work had been valuable. He had spent a career perfecting ways to chemically destroy the human mind, and never accepted responsibility for the damage. The veterans of Edgewood continue to seek recognition. Many have died waiting. The VA acknowledges their service but disputes the connection between their symptoms and the experiments. Ketchum's legacy, proof that the mind can be weaponized and that those who weaponize it rarely face consequences. 7,000 soldiers, decades of experiments, 0 prosecutions. The psychochemical weapons program ended not with justice but with silence. The cluster munitions inventor. In 1943, German engineers at Rheinmetall developed the SD-2 butterfly bomb, small sub-munitions released in hundreds from a single container, the first cluster weapon. The concept was simple. Instead of one large explosion, scatter hundreds of smaller ones across a wide area. Maximum casualties per sortie. The Americans adopted and expanded the concept. The CBU-87 became the standard, each bomb containing 202 sub-munitions, each capable of penetrating armor and killing personnel. The problem emerged immediately. Not all sub-munitions exploded. Failure rates reached 5 to 30%. Hundreds of thousands of unexploded bomblets remained on battlefields. These became de facto landmines, killing civilians for decades after wars ended. Laos remains the most bombed country per capita in history. 80 million unexploded bomblets still contaminate its soil. In Laos, children still die picking up bommies, the local name for submunitions. They look like toys. They explode like grenades. The engineers knew about failure rates from the beginning. Internal documents show they accepted the trade-off. Battlefield effectiveness outweighed post-conflict civilian casualties. Every major military used cluster munitions. US, USSR, UK, France, Israel, China. The weapons proved too effective to abandon, too deadly to use responsibly. The 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions banned the weapons. 112 countries signed. The United States, Russia, and China refused. Without the major powers, the ban has limited effect. Cluster munitions continue to be used, most recently in Syria, Yemen, and Ukraine. The civilian toll continues to mount. Clearance efforts continue worldwide. In Laos alone, at the current rate, it will take 300 years to remove all unexploded ordnance. The war ended 50 years ago. The inventors of cluster munitions created a weapon that keeps killing for generations. A single bombing raid becomes a permanent minefield. The war never truly ends. No single inventor can be blamed. Cluster munitions evolved through committees, contracts, and incremental improvements, but the collective result is one of history's most indiscriminate weapons. The legacy continues. Today, newer cluster munitions are designed with self-destruct mechanisms to reduce UXO, but field tests show failure rates persist. Technology cannot solve a fundamental design flaw. As of 2024, the United States provided cluster munitions to Ukraine for use against Russian forces. The cycle continues. Tactical necessity, overriding long-term humanitarian concerns. Defenders argue cluster munitions save lives by ending conflicts faster. Critics counter that saving soldiers today creates victims for centuries. Both arguments have merit. Neither resolves the dilemma. The cluster munition exists because militaries wanted maximum destruction with minimum sorties. It succeeded. The consequences will outlive everyone who designed it. Cluster munitions, weapons that keep on killing long after the war ends. The inventors are gone. The victims are still being created. The directed energy builder. In 1958, physicist Theodore Maiman built the first working laser at Hughes Research Laboratories. Within months, military planners asked the obvious question: can it be weaponized? The answer was yes, but it took decades. Early lasers were too weak, too bulky, required too much power. The death ray of science fiction seemed impossible. The breakthrough came in the 1980s with chemical lasers, using chemical reactions to generate megawatts of power. The miracle laser could destroy missiles in flight. Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars, proposed space-based laser platforms to shoot down Soviet ICBMs. The program spent billions, but never deployed an operational weapon. But ground-based directed energy weapons advanced steadily. By the 2000s, the active denial system used millimeter waves to create unbearable burning sensations, pain without visible injury. The active denial system heats skin to 54 degrees Celsius in seconds. Subjects describe it as being touched by a hot iron. The military calls it non-lethal. Critics call it a torture device. The ADS was deployed to Afghanistan in 2010 but recalled without being used. Commanders feared the optics, American forces using a ray gun on Afghan civilians. Meanwhile, laser weapons continued to develop. The Navy's LAWS system, deployed in 2014, could destroy drones and small boats with a concentrated beam. The cost per shot, about $1. Today, directed energy weapons are deployed on ships, vehicles, and aircraft. The US, China, Russia, and Israel all have operational systems. The ray gun is no longer science fiction. The potential applications are disturbing. Lasers that blind rather than kill, microwave weapons that cause neurological damage, directed energy that leaves no evidence of attack. The 1995 Protocol on Blinding Laser Weapons prohibits lasers specifically designed to cause permanent blindness. But lasers designed for other purposes that happen to blind, those remain legal. The builders of directed energy weapons work at defense contractors and national laboratories. Their names are rarely public. Their inventions are classified, but their work changes warfare forever. The ethical questions multiply. Weapons that cause pain without injury, blindness without death, neurological damage without evidence. Where are the lines? Directed energy weapons exist in a legal gray zone, not banned, barely regulated, rapidly proliferating. The inventors built weapons that international law hasn't caught up with. The Havana Syndrome incidents suggest directed energy may already be used covertly. Diplomats and intelligence officers reporting brain damage from invisible attacks. Attribution remains impossible. The directed energy builders created weapons that operate at the speed of light, cost almost nothing to fire, and leave minimal evidence. They may have created the perfect instrument of covert warfare. From Maiman's laboratory curiosity to weapons that can blind, burn, and damage brains, directed energy has completed its journey from science to warfare in 60 years. The ray gun is real. It flies on warships and stalks diplomatic residences. Its builders remain anonymous. Its full capabilities remain classified. Its future is already here. The autonomous kill system. In 2020, a Libyan drone autonomously identified and attacked a human target without any human command. The first confirmed kill by an AI-directed weapons system. The weapon was a Turkish-made Kargu-2, a loitering munition that can autonomously identify and eliminate targets using facial recognition and machine learning. The UN report on the Libya incident was clinical. The drone was programmed to attack targets without requiring data connectivity between the operator and the munition. Machine autonomy, human death. The scientists who built these systems work at universities and tech companies worldwide. They develop computer vision and autonomous navigation. The military applications come later. Google employees protested when they discovered their AI work was being used for Project Maven, a Pentagon program to improve drone targeting. Some quit. The project continued. Today, dozens of countries develop autonomous weapons, drones that can identify and attack without human approval. The technology is cheap, spreading fast, and nearly impossible to regulate. The core question: should a machine ever decide to kill a human? The engineers building these systems often avoid the question. They build capability. Others decide policy. Proponents argue autonomous weapons could be more precise than humans. No fear, no anger, no revenge. They could reduce civilian casualties by making better targeting decisions. Critics counter: machines can't understand context, can't show mercy, can't be held accountable. An algorithm that kills the wrong person can't be court-martialed. It can only be updated. The campaign to stop killer robots has pushed for a preemptive ban since 2013. Thousands of AI researchers have signed pledges not to develop autonomous weapons. But the development continues. UN discussions on lethal autonomous weapons have continued for a decade without producing a binding treaty. Countries developing the technology have blocked consensus. Meanwhile, the technology advances. AI systems now outperform human pilots in dogfights. Autonomous drones coordinate in swarms. The gap between human and machine combat capability widens. The military logic is clear. If autonomous weapons are more effective, any nation that refuses them falls behind. The arms race creates its own inevitability. The scientists who build these systems face the same choice as their predecessors: refuse and be replaced, or participate and share responsibility for what follows. The autonomous kill system represents the endpoint of weapons development. Machines that decide who lives and dies, operating faster than human oversight allows, accountable to no one. Some researchers argue we've already crossed the threshold. The Libya incident proves machines can kill autonomously. The question is no longer will they, but how often. The developers of autonomous weapons are building something unprecedented: systems that can select and eliminate human beings without any human judgment at the moment of death. This is different from every weapon that came before. A nuclear bomb requires a human to launch it. A landmine is triggered by the victim. But autonomous weapons choose their victims. The builders know what they're creating. Internal documents show they debate the ethics. Some quit, others rationalize. The work continues regardless. The autonomous kill system is the final chapter in the history of weapons built by scientists. After this, the weapons build themselves. The scientists who built weapons too dangerous to use now have successors who build weapons that use themselves. The human has been removed from the equation entirely. 10 scientists who built weapons too dangerous to use. Each believed they were serving a higher purpose. Each created something that could end civilization. The weapons they built were all too dangerous to use until they were used. Nuclear bombs dropped. Agent Orange sprayed. Nerve gas deployed. Cluster munitions scattered. The pattern continues. The question for the future: will autonomous kill systems join this list? The technology exists. The restraints do not.